Good morning, everybody. Can I do the very technical test of if you can hear me, wave your hands? Oh, that is so cool. Thank you, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Business Before Hours. Can you believe it? We're in September. Before we kick off, I'd just like for us all to take a quick moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting from today, wherever that may be, and pay our respects to our elders, past, present, and emerging. I'd like to give a quick welcome to the Chamber staff this morning. We've got Ross, Gabby, and Rachel with us. Board members this morning, we've got Steve Owens and Celeste Pearce. Welcome, guys. From Albury City, we have Councillor Alice Glacken with us this morning. Thank you for joining us, Alice. Albury City staff, we have Tracy Squire, Brad Ferris, both Deputy CEOs of Albury City, and we've also got Ambrose Glass and Angela Larkin. Thank you for joining us. And an extra special welcome this morning to Sussan Ley, Member for Farrer and the Minister for the Environment. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. A quick introduction to our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we just simply cannot achieve what we achieve, and we punch well above our weight considering most chambers of commerce around these days. So I'd like to extend a really warm welcome to our sponsors. We've got Albury City, Qantas, HIB Insurance Brokers, Blacklocks, Lavington, Telstra and NBN Co as our platinum sponsors. Our media partner is 1494 2AY. Our gold sponsors are Harwood Andrews and IBT. Our silver sponsor is Shoreway Employment Training. Shoreway Employment and Training. And our bronze sponsors, we've got Integrity, Total HRM, PRD Real Estate Albury, RSM Australia, and Peter Stewart. Now, without these sponsors, like I said, we cannot achieve what we are able to achieve at the moment. So particularly through some pretty challenging times, I think it's a very significant show of support to the business community from these sponsors. So we're very grateful. This morning, I believe we have one new member with us, Michael Thompson from Social Plus Support Network. So I'd like to extend a quick extra special welcome to Michael. So I can't see the participant list in front of me at the moment, but if you are with us, Michael, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining Chamber as well. And we hope you enjoy this morning. I guess by way of a quick update for you all of what we've been up to here at Chamber, if you've probably noticed already that we've changed the way that we email you. So we're trying to stop sending you hundreds of different emails through the week and consolidate them down to as few as possible. So keep an eye out moving forward. We've got a weekly, what we call the snapshot email, which goes out every Wednesday, and that's got all the stuff that can't wait for the monthly e-news, which is called In the Know. So the monthly e-news is a lot more in-depth and elaborate, and there's all sorts of cool stuff in there, but the weekly snapshot is full of the stuff that can't wait, and I guess pretty relevant in our current times when there's so much change happening every day, I guess. I'd like to thank everybody for participating in our last survey. So you're probably aware by now that we've been advocating quite heavily for business, and we've had to try and advocate for the changes that we all need to survive and make our way through the current economic circumstances. Really pleased to say that we've been able to, have our pleas heard, and that there has been some change which we have needed. We're not all the way there yet, obviously, and we may not get all the way there. That's just the nature of such a heavily impacting set of circumstances that we're in at the moment with COVID. But I just wanted to thank you all for your input, because without it, our voices don't get heard. So you can keep an eye out for the report from the last survey, which you'll be able to see in this Wednesday's snapshot email. So coming up in October, we've got a pretty busy month. We've got the AGM, which will be conducted on Tuesday, the 13th of October. We'll be doing that online via Zoom. And if you are interested, you should have seen by now that board nominations are open as well. We have some vacant positions, directorship positions here at Albury Northside, so we'd welcome you to nominate for those positions if you're up for the challenge. Nominations will close on the 24th of September. Also in October, it is Mental Health Month, and we have a full program which I think is, given the circumstances, is very appropriate and apt in its timing. So keep an eye out for that. There'll be lots of initiatives around managing mental health in general, but more specifically in the business environments that we're in at the moment. And then a quick plug, I guess. If you know anybody, or if you yourself are looking to transition out of a home office and into a small office, we have some rooms for rent here at Chamber. So please feel free to reach out to myself or any of the team, and we can send you some details on that as well. So I think I've spoken enough. I know I don't like the sound of my own voice, and I'm starting to hear my voice too much. So that means it's time to tee up our presenters this morning. Just a quick reminder as well, if you do have any questions for any of our presenters this morning, please ask the questions via the chat feature. So you should be able to find that chat feature in your Zoom menu. You simply click on the chat icon and you can enter your question in there. So I would encourage you, if you do have questions, please enter them in there. I can see them and then I can relay them on to the presenters. So this morning we're kicking off with Sussan Ley MP, our member for Farrer and also Minister for the Environment. Sussan, we're really grateful for your time this morning. We have Sussan with us this morning to give us a bit of an update on the extensions to the JobKeeper payments, the experiences of women through the COVID-19 crisis, Sussan's role in dealing with the border closures, and the role that the Commonwealth and the National Cabinet have been playing and will continue to play in bringing the states and premiers together. So Sussan, if you've already unmuted yourself, I see, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Thanks, Carrick, and it's good to join you all. I'm in Deniliquin, as you might be able to see from my background. Talking water, we had a very good announcement for our farmers and by extension our regional communities on Friday, with the Water Minister Keith Pitt effectively saying community consultation was going to be at the core of our water policy, $234 million package altogether. And I say community consultation because people here feel they've been consulted to death but never actually listened to. So it's really a change of approach. And most importantly, no more water buybacks and a different way of achieving the outcomes in a basin plan, which so far from the people I've talked about here have been very welcome. So I'm really appreciating the chance to get out and about in my patch. I've spent the last fortnight in Canberra. The JobKeeper extensions and changes to the Fair Work Act passed the Parliament at the end of last week. And I'm just thinking back to March when the Treasurer said he thought the June quarter would fall by around 20%, and March, was just a horror show looking forward. Back in May, we thought it would be 10%, and last Wednesday we saw the June quarter GDP numbers fall by the largest amount on record, namely 7%. So that's savage, and while it compares favourably with OECD outcomes, it's cold comfort for people, particularly on the border, who don't want to be wrapped up in a statistic that says actually you're not doing that badly, but actually want governments to respond to their particular circumstances. So top of mind with the conversations I've been having with my colleagues has been the need to continue JobKeeper, to perhaps look at doing, the program has changed slightly, but it's still with us till March next year, or the March quarter next year. But by then, who knows what we'll be experiencing, particularly locally. So JobKeeper and JobSeeker are continuing. The turnover test has changed slightly so that it reflects 3-month period now compared to a 3-month period a year ago. That's the changed eligibility to JobKeeper from the end of September. I know that it's been a lifeline for many, but it hasn't been able to be accessed by all. And while we've got JobSeeker with a coronavirus supplement of additional $550 a fortnight, that's, I suppose, narrowed the gap between someone who is connected to their employer via JobKeeper, someone who doesn't have a job at all because their employer just couldn't keep them, or they are a small business and they just couldn't keep going. That's, as I said, the most important thing overall, but in terms of our border closures, I have to say it has been incredibly frustrating. It has been incredibly frustrating to watch what's worse than a stage 4 lockdown unfold around us. And I remember about a week ago picking up the phone to the Prime Minister, and he said, "Oh, I'll ring Gladys." And every time we approach him, he would say, "I'll chat to Gladys," because of course he can't affect the changes. He's actually taken individual compassionate cases directly to the New South Wales government and been involved in that detail, because, as he said to me when I gave him a bit of a document with all of the agricultural perverse outcomes, I said, "Look, you know, this is what's happening, but this is the detail. This is the daily life impact on people who've got a business on this side of the border who can't actually cross the border to open their business." Anyway, I'm going back a few weeks with that, but I just want you to know how I realise how tough it was for you. And you know, it's the first question when we all get together around our virtual cabinet table. What's happening? You know, what's happening on the borders? It's not just our border, but our border is the worst affected. So the push has yielded some results, and lots of people have pushed, and I've appreciated, you know, so many border colleagues doing this. And we've got a better border bubble, but we don't want this border locked down one day longer than it has to be. And the Premier of New South Wales said that, and you know, she certainly in her visit last week genuinely, I wasn't here, I was in Canberra, but genuinely appreciated how awful it was for us. The real problem underpinning, in my view, underpinning where we are, and the announcements, the disappointing announcements from Daniel Andrews on the weekend, are that I don't think Victoria has got on top of its tracing and testing. And as a former health minister, I know that public health is done well when it's done locally. That's what New South Wales does. You should be incredibly proud of the New South Wales public health system. It has, you know, it has really served us well. And 50 cases in New South Wales is not the same as 50 cases in Victoria, because if there's 50 cases in New South Wales, we know where they are, or the New South Wales government knows where they are, knows who they've been in contact with, and has themselves contacted their contacts, usually within 48 hours. The issue, I believe, in Victoria is that that is not being done well. And if you can't do that well, you revert to a hard lockdown. And we've actually seen hard lockdowns in some developing countries overseas because they don't have the ability to contact trace. So we just have to push again. And the PM's done that this morning, if you've read the media, to say, you know, can you please demonstrate how you are tracing and testing and contacting people, because that's at the core of living with the virus. And for us on the border, anecdotally, of course, we know there's no cases on the Victorian local government areas on the other side. We know that, but we haven't got that proof because Victoria doesn't have that proof. So I'm an optimist, as many of you know. I do see light at the end of the tunnel. I know that with this set of circumstances we're facing with the virus, whatever we predict will be wrong. So it's highly likely that we could predict that things will improve much faster than we expect. And I'm hanging on to that thought. I think it's quite possible. So, you know, for all of you in your individual business circumstances, very happy for you to make, well, what essentially would be private representations to my office. And we can work through your particular issues. If they're on the borderline, if they fall too far on one side, it's very difficult. But we have taken many of those individual cases to the Treasurer, to the Treasurer's office, to the Assistant Minister for Revenue and so on. So we're absolutely on the case for you there. I've got statistics about how much money the federal government's pumped into the economy. The debt is eye-watering. I don't want to repeat the numbers any more than I have to. At some stage, Australia will have to start paying this. We as a nation will have to start paying this back, which is why we're so worried about Victoria, which is the first stage of lockdown has cost $12 billion, and we're entering the second stage at the end of this week. Karen, you mentioned women in the pandemic. I represent the Minister of Women in the lower house, so I have had access to quite a lot of the things that we're doing for women, and they're quite significant, not just around employment, but around services outside work. And I think our commitment to superannuation for women and allowing them to catch up has been one of the hallmarks of our women's policy. Certainly the case that of the jobs that have been lost, more jobs that have been resumed, if I can put it that way, have gone to women. And that's really not surprising given that retail, hospitality, tourism, tend to be jobs where you see more women working in them. So we are aware of the particular situation of people who are on low incomes, and often women, and often with caring responsibilities and children. So I want to reassure you of that. Today I'm heading to Moama, and I've got a tourism roundtable with quite a lot of people who represent tourism operators on the Murray, and I know that the things that they will tell me will be very similar to the things that I've heard in Albury and would hear all the way up and down my electorate. So there's room for more business stimulus in the current thinking of the government. What that looks like and when it happens is yet to be determined, quite possibly as JobKeeper phases out next year and we have a look at particular sectors that need help, in the same way that we can't spread JobKeeper completely across the board, given that some states have very few cases and are relatively unaffected by the virus. But my argument will be that small business, and particularly tourism, small business and business that depends on manufacturing and freight is vital. The Treasurer often says we have to keep businesses going and people in jobs as we come out the other side of this pandemic, which sounds kind of, oh, well, yes, of course. But when you think about it, it would be devastating to the economy if people who have perfectly viable businesses lost them, and only 3 months later the situation started to come back to normal. So that's what we're looking at as a government. How do we just keep those businesses, small businesses, going, and how do we keep people connected to jobs? Because losing businesses is dreadful. Losing jobs and having unemployment rise higher than it need to be is also dreadful. So look, I will stop talking there. I know there's others to present and there may well be questions. So thank you again very much for having me on this morning's program.
Thank you, Susan. We've just got one question, which I'm not sure if you know of the detail of this and how to answer it, but one of our members, David, has just asked, just regarding JobKeeper, he's asked how this will affect new businesses that have started, say, in last November that don't actually have that 12 months of trading history. I know with JobKeeper version 1, there was an alternative testing method. I can only assume, I haven't looked at the detail myself, that there will be an alternative test for those businesses as well with JobKeeper 2.0.
Look, I think you have to have been operating your business when the coronavirus hit. Now, Lockie from my office is on the line. Lockie, do you want to just take that question on notice, or do we know? I have to unmute.
I can answer that question. I think it was David who asked, was it?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Yeah, the answer to that question is that you had to have been carrying on a business in Australia as of the 1st of March. And there's a further test, depending on your circumstances, to have had an ABN by the 12th of March. But as Susan says, it was designed, the legislation was actually backdated to include back to the date of the announcement, which is a typical technique these days to ensure that people can be eligible for it as soon as it's announced. So no, you don't have to have 12 months of trading history to be eligible.
Great. Thanks, Lachlan. Very, very good to hear, Susan, the focus moving forward from the government on the small business support. I think obviously it's probably biased of me to say, but you know, considering that that small business makes up such a large percentage of the economy, particularly in New South Wales, that retention versus attraction focus is going to pay dividends for the government. So we absolutely welcome that, and I think any kind of support after JobKeeper will definitely be something that's keenly listened to by small business, because there's quite a lot of nervousness out there, even transitioning into JobKeeper 2.0. So it is heartening to hear the government's focus in that sense, and I'd just like to remind everybody that Sussan has obviously, she's mentioned that any contact to her office is welcomed as well for representation. It's great to hear that whilst the federal government may not be able to have as much control over the state jurisdictions, that there's still a role that you can play in helping advocate for the changes that we might need through the federal government as well. So thank you, Sussan. We really appreciate your time this morning. We will include your office's details in our post-event email out to our members, and I would encourage anybody who is in some challenging circumstances, and particularly unique circumstances, to make contact with Sussan's office and ourselves as well. And we look forward to helping and supporting however we can as well. So thank you, Sussan, very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Righto, so on to our next presenter for this morning. We've got Phil Badura with us from ActionCOACH. Phil is a long-standing member of Chamber. Welcome, Phil. If you want to unmute yourself and get your screen ready to share, mate. Phil is going to be speaking with us this morning about business leadership and, very appropriately, adapting to the new normal, whatever that new normal is.
Okay, thanks, Carrick, and welcome to everyone, and thank you for investing your time to join in today's Business Before Hours meeting. If we have not met, my name is Phil Badura. One of the things that I love most in life is helping others achieve success through sharing my passion for business, systems, planning and goal setting. Today we'll look at the importance of business leadership, and in particular, how to adapt to the new normal that is emerging at a rapid rate since the onset of the global pandemic. So please have your pen and paper ready, as we'll be moving quickly through this, and I have a lot of information that I'd like to share with you. So leadership is defined as a process of social influence which maximises the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. In today's economic environment, the task of leadership is still fundamentally the same. What has changed, though, is that we will need now to lead our teams with a new set of tools while focusing on shorter-term goals. The need to focus on shorter-term goals has become essential, mainly due to the speed of change that is occurring in every aspect of business as a result of COVID-19. We must be ready and prepared to change direction at a moment's notice. There are four areas that we have identified where strong leadership is critical with all businesses. Firstly, communication. Communication with team members, customers, suppliers, and stakeholders, and communication with the broader community. It is vitally important that the communication channels are updated and communicated on a regular basis. Secondly, be positive. Lead your people. Look for the small wins every hour, every day. Panic and worry never helped anyone. Third, be prepared to change. Lead the change. Look at all your areas of your business, including your products and services, your pricing, delivery, and staffing. Look for the opportunities in each of these areas that will have a positive impact from any changes that you make. Fourth, keep marketing your business. Your marketing message has to change. What your message was 3 to 6 months ago may no longer be relevant. Change your message to what the market needs right now. It must be compassionate, it must be relevant. More importantly, don't stop your marketing. Remember, for every downturn, it is followed by an upturn. Your ongoing and relevant marketing message will keep your business front of mind with your customer base for when we come out the other side. And yes, there will be an other side. Leading successfully requires an understanding of what people are thinking, not just what they are doing. Leaders need to be to see and to be seen. The C relates to how you gather information needed to understand what is going on within the organisation. The be seen relates to how others get their information about and from you as the leader. As a leader, be more aware of the impressions that you are making. Are you visible to your team? And what are they seeing about your leadership? Today, leading requires a focus on what we call the 3O model: outcomes, others, and ourselves. Focusing on outcomes. Here, you will need to lead with the purpose of reaching a desired outcome. Focusing on others. Lead with and through your people. You are more influential when you focus on others. And then focusing on ourselves. Identify with your own beliefs and assumptions. Who you are and how you lead is important wherever your people work. Right now, New South Wales is on the path of coming out of survive and heading into the dry phase. Unfortunately, for those of us in Victoria, that's not the case. Which path your business follows is decided the minute that you start planning which path you want your business to follow. How well you and your business come out the other side of the survive phase will depend how well you have planned ahead. The business leaders who have adapted strong leadership have sought out options for applying a pivot strategy and created a pivot action plan for adapting their business model, engaging with their customers differently, shifting the products and services, and reallocating resources such as team members, marketing, and sales efforts. Which of the 3 curves do you want your business to follow? Will you be creating a plan for buoyant trading? Even if you create a plan for buoyant trading and end up with tough trading, this is still far better than having no plan. The reality is that tens of thousands of businesses who are not aware of how to pivot now and come out of this with a strong plan will suffer the lower curve and may not be in business by the end of 2020. What must you do differently, and how must your business model be adapted to achieve the top curve? These are the questions you need to continually be asking yourself. Is it fair to say that whilst some businesses have been dramatically impacted, such as the hospitality industry and some sectors of the retail industry, there has also been other industries that have thrived, such as the manufacturing industry and some sectors of the trades industries in this current COVID environment. With the speed of change that is occurring within the business environment as a result of the pandemic, right now, business has become a 90-day game. Your leadership focus must be on creating a 90-day plan that is relevant for your business right now. Include the key members of your team in creating the plan. Who knows? They may have some great ideas that you may not have thought of. The 90-day plan must have 3 to 4 key goals or outcomes the business needs to achieve in the next 90 days. The next step is to identify 5+ action steps that will be required to achieve the outcome and then share the plan. When everyone is on board and is collectively contributing to the goals or outcomes, the likelihood of the outcomes being achieved is significantly higher. Some areas you may want to consider as part of your current 90-day plans may include changing your business model, that is pivoting. What can you do to sell your products or services differently? Virtual is the new normal. How can you adapt to the new virtual way of doing business, e.g. an online store? Do you have staff working remotely? Cash flow management. How well do you know your numbers? What systems do you need to put in place to provide you with the right information in order to make better decisions? Your marketing and marketing message. What needs to change with your communication and education messages? Sales and sales training. Train your team to be empathetic with their sales process. And then customer service delivery. Review and challenge yourself in what you are doing right now to keep your customers on board. Is it relevant? Is it serving your customer requirements well? We have identified 5 phases that we will go through within our businesses through this global pandemic. In helping you to act right now, this chart is a great depiction of how to prepare and plan your path for moving forward and staying ahead of the game. It outlines what you need to be considering at a personal level as well as at the business level through each phase of the cycle. The great unknown for everyone is how long each phase will last. And with what we know now, we could even take a step backward at any time. Victoria is an example of this. What is important is that you have considered and created a plan that is flexible enough to move you quickly from one phase to another, both forwards and backwards. Those that have prepared and planned well will be so far ahead of the game and will bounce forward far faster than those who have not taken the time to plan their pathway forward. We are repeatedly hearing our government sectors talking about how they are preparing and planning for what is the unknown. Shouldn't we be doing the same in our businesses too? Remember, in Brian Tracy's words, every minute spent on planning will save you 10 minutes in execution. Let me repeat, every minute spent on planning will save you 10 minutes in execution. If you have not already started planning, make a decision to start today. It has never been more important. There is plenty of local expertise to assist you with planning and getting you started, particularly if you're not sure of where to start. Speak with the team at the Chamber for who can assist you best. One thing for sure is that the way we conduct our business in the future will be different, and we must find ways to adapt to the new normal. Your job as the leader of your business is to keep your team focused without fear. They will be naturally concerned and fearful for their jobs, how they will provide for their families. To keep them focused, you will need to reassure them constantly, every day, even several times a day. Keep them informed on how the business is tracking. Fear is worse than the actual thing. Your team need to see you leading from the front. The team needs to see you setting the immediate direction for the business. They need to see you communicating with customers, being in front of other people. Give your team something to focus on. More importantly than ever before, now is the time for you to be the leader in your business. And remember, just like the virus, your mindset is infectious. Be mindful of what you are spreading. Thank you. I'm here to help.
Thanks, Phil. That you had some fantastic words of wisdom in there, mate. I've written probably too much down to go over quickly, but the key things that that I think I took away from that is the short-term views and gains are critical at the moment to be able to get those quick wins on the board. Being open to change, obviously. If we're not open to change in circumstances like now, then there's probably something wrong with us. I love the saying, outcomes, others, and ourselves. I think that that is great common sense and a really a great summary of a mindset that I think a lot of businesses can benefit from. Getting teams involved in the planning and the communication within the organisation as well, I think is a very that's a great way to help manage your team in so many different ways, but particularly in a mental well-being perspective as well. Giving them the buy-in to their security. And the data-driven decisions, obviously, we live in this online world at the moment, and there is so many metrics in there that we can access and track, and making more informed, educated decisions using that data only makes sense. So, mate, thank you so much, Phil. You've spoken some very wise words of wisdom and some great common sense.
Okay, thanks, Carrick. It's one of the things that we do consistently every day with a whole range of different businesses, and I'm here to help. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. And we'll, just for everybody tuned in today, we'll send Phil's contact details as well as his presentation out to you after this morning's meeting as well. So please feel free to get in touch with Phil if you so desire. Thank you, Phil. Now we're on to our next presenter. Just a reminder for everyone, if you do have a question to ask of any of today's presenters, please ask them in the chat feature. Next up, we've got Rosa Raco from WR Law with us. Rosa, you are on the ball. You're already sharing your screen. You're all ready to go. So I'm just going to throw straight to you. Well done and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the other presenters. Phil, I really enjoyed that. It was really motivating. So thank you. My name is Rosa and I'm an employment lawyer based in Bendigo. And you might be wondering why is an employment lawyer who's based in Bendigo involved with the Albury Chamber? And I think Carrick answered that with his very first presentation, his first comments, that I think the Albury Chamber punches well above its weight. I find them progressive and motivating actually as well. They're always doing stuff and they're very open and they were very welcoming of me, even though I'm in the saddest state of the country, Victoria, at the moment. So it has been a very interesting time for us here. Look, I have worked in corporate law firms and I've worked all over the place, but I've worked in employment law all my life, really, and either as an ER person, employee relations person, an HR person, and finally as an employment lawyer when I realised that employment law itself, and law is my passion. I've worked at a top-tier firm in Sydney and Canberra, and most recently in a national firm. So I've serviced, even though I'm in Victoria, I've certainly serviced a lot of clients in New South Wales and WA and everywhere. I moved back to Bendigo, which is my hometown, when my young children were ready to go to school. I did everything late. I had children late, 48, and I started my business at 55. So I'm a bit of a late bloomer. One of my favourite posts I put out is that I'm a late bloomer. But I suppose I tell you that because I just want people to know that there's not much I haven't seen in those 30 years. So nothing really shocks me. I shouldn't say that. Sometimes I do come across things that shock me still, but not much does. What I want to talk about today is really go back to basics. I think employment law is actually very complicated, and those of you who employ people would undoubtedly agree. So I wanted to talk about where employment laws actually come from, because there is a bit of confusion with people out there as to where they come from. So I've tried to do this in a picture. I don't know if it's a great picture, but I want you to keep this in your mind as we go through the presentation. But I've put pyramid in an ocean of what I call an ocean of common law. So common law is judge-made law. So when decisions get made, particularly in the high courts, there's a hierarchy of courts, that is law. So legislation is always interpreted with reference to the common law. And I think a really good example is, I was going to say health and safety law, because we've got the legislation, but then we've got common law duties that exist for employers, like the duty of care for their employers, which is a common law duty that has existed well before the legislation existed. So please ask me any questions along the way, or and if there's anything I'm not explaining clearly, please ask me, because no question is a stupid question. I remember when I was a law student, I asked a question of my tutor, and I still know tutoring in law before I got too tired with children in my own business. And I remember asking my tutor this question, and he looked at me, and I just said I didn't quite understand what he was saying. And he looked at me and said, well, I can't help it if your knowledge base is so low. So I tell that story because I promise I'll never say that to you. I'll never say that to anyone. Okay, so underneath, everyone would know the Fair Work Act. That is our base entitlements. That is the basic obligations and entitlements that all employees and employers are subject to. National system employers is, again, a little bit of a complicated concept that I hope no one asks me about because it's a bit too complicated to explain in 5 minutes. But if someone wants to ask me later, I can talk about that. Just be aware that most employers are covered by the Fair Work Act. Sitting on top of the Fair Work Act then is a modern award, which is like an industry. So there'll be a hairdresser's award, and enterprise agreements, so agreements that exist at the enterprise level. So everything builds on each other. So the enterprise agreements and the modern awards talk about things that the Fair Work Act doesn't. So it'll talk about things like hairdressers working on Saturdays or working in evenings. So it gives you more level of particularity. And enterprise agreements do the same, but at the enterprise level. So often big manufacturing sites will have an enterprise agreement, and often people will have it, or organised businesses will have it when they've got a lot of awards and it's really complicated. They just want to make it very simple and straightforward. One of my clients at the moment, they have 9 enterprise agreements at their enterprise. So they've gone down the route of having specific enterprise agreements for the different sorts of occupations at their industry. And then I forgot to talk about other legislation. So we've got common law, we've got the Fair Work Act. So there's obviously other legislation that impacts on employment as well. I've mentioned our health and safety legislation, anti-discrimination legislation, all of those other pieces of legislation, both state and federal, because we've got a very complicated system, I think, as COVID has highlighted, of state and federal jurisdictions. They impact on everything. So again, so for the Fair, I'll give you one provision of the Fair Work Act that causes people a lot of grief, I think, is that there's a provision that you can terminate one of your employees if they've been absent from work for 3 months without pay. That's the prima facie baseline position of the Fair Work Act. However, what happens there is if they're absent because they're sick, the anti-discrimination legislation comes into play. So I've got one at the moment where someone has sacked one of their employees, a quite aggressive employer, unfortunately, who was particularly wanting to get rid of this employee, but they didn't consider reasonable adjustments for her to come back to the workplace. They just dismissed them out of hand. So I'm running a matter in the federal jurisdiction for various reasons to say that they discriminated against her, even though she'd been absent from work for 4 months without pay. Sitting on top of that is employment contracts and policies, and I'll talk about those now. So let's go through. I'm not great with Zoom. I've sort of tried to again pictorially show some of the other obligations and overlapping entitlements to show how complicated it is. So we have Fair Work Act and the employer and the employee in the middle, and then we have state-based long service leave act, we have federal disability discrimination act, then we have federal sex discrimination. Then in Victoria at least we have the Equal Opportunity Act, which is state-based, and Health and Safety Act. This is why employers get confused, and this is why I do what I do, because it is my passion. And again, I'll tell a very quick story that I have a friend who's a dentist, and I went around and I was visiting him and his wife, and I was saying, God, this has been this amazing case this week. Can I tell you about this amazing case that was decided this week? And he said to me, you can tell me about that amazing case if you let me tell you about the amazing root canal I did yesterday. So it made me realise that my passion isn't everyone else's passion, but that that's why it's okay to get advice and support, because you can't run a business. I find myself it's difficult running a business and having to do everything and then try and keep on top of, particularly at the moment, it's almost daily changes with employment laws. So this is a Fair Work Act. At the heart of the Fair Work Act is what they call the National Employment Standards. You would have heard of this, the NES. I've listed them all there for you. You'll get a copy of this afterwards, so I won't go through them. But it just covers basic things like annual leave and maximum hours you're allowed to work. On top of it, as I've said, sits a modern award or an enterprise agreement. So a modern award will cover what the wages are in your particular industry. The Fair Work Act will tell you what the minimum wages are for anyone in the country, but the wages will vary from industry to industry. It'll talk about things like penalty rates for unsocial, unpredictable hours, etc., leave loading, etc. Enterprise agreements, as I said, are collective agreements at the workplace. The Fair Work Commission must approve them, but they also approve modern awards. You would have, that was a couple have been approved recently. They may replace some or all of the conditions of a modern award, but people must be better off overall. You would have heard of the boot test. Nothing in this pyramid can go backwards. You can only add to it. You can't take away from your basic entitlements that you get under the NES. Employment contracts sit on top of that. Again, so if you remember my little pyramid, so employment contracts sit on top of the modern awards. So they'll cover things that aren't covered in modern awards that are particular, again, to your workplace. So it'll be things like confidential information. What information is confidential? What restraints of trade you might put in there to stop someone going next door and opening, or doing as much as you can to stop someone going next door and opening up in competition. And returning property like mobile phones. I mean, I think employment contracts, a lot of smaller businesses don't have them, and it makes my job more difficult at times, because I've certainly in recent times had a number of cases where people have stolen confidential information and opened up next door. And then I've got to rely on the common law, which I can, but it's much easier to rely on a provision in a contract, because then it's a contractual breach and much more straightforward than relying on things like fiduciary duty or, you know, duty to act in good faith and all these sorts of things. The other very good thing, that's what I'm getting at, employment contracts contain clauses that become legal terms then and are enforceable. So it's not just, you know, nice to have. Sitting on top of them are policies and, oh, I should go back one. This is where I get a bit, so sorry. A policy tends to be more a behavioural guide, a code of conduct, for example. But sometimes it's considered in informal contracts when managers can implement consequences for employees' varying policies. It's essential though, you must have policies, you must have policies for things that you have legal liability for, like bullying, sexual harassment, sexual discrimination. Because if you don't have them and one of your employees commits one of those sorts of conducts, then you can be personally liable because you haven't done everything to abrogate or to discharge that liability back to your employees. An employment contract should always say the employee agrees to comply with all current and future policies of the employer. Again, that's a really sneaky way of being able to implement, sneaky in a positive way, to be able to implement changes in your workplace without having to get people to sign new contracts. Because getting people to sign new contracts, if you ever tried to do it, is really difficult. Policies versus contracts, we need both. The difference between policies and contracts is one of enforceability. A contractual breach is a very straightforward thing you can, take your employee on. A contract is legally binding and it spells out the terms of the conditions of your employees. You really should have both. I'm going to very quickly talk about different types of employment. I'm conscious I'm coming out of time. You would all know, of course, you have all different types of employment: casual, fixed term, permanent, and a contractor. I don't like people using casuals too much because there's been some big cases recently where casuals, you would have heard of them, have been considered to be permanent employees. And that means you have to go back and pay them their entitlements, long service leave, or not long service leave, because they're always entitled to that in Victoria at least, but annual leave, holiday pay, etc. for public holidays. The other thing is, I don't know why people have casuals on as a long term, because the only benefit I can see is that you don't have to pay a redundancy, is probably one of the benefits. But they're not excluded from unfair dismissal if they're there over 6 or 12 months, depending on the size of your business. And a lot of modern awards now have got the right to request to be converted. So I think it also, this goes back to what Phil was talking about earlier, makes people feel that they are casual. So if you want your staff to be committed and loyal, then give them a real job so that they're not disposable. That's it. Thank you for listening. There'll be lots of things that I haven't covered today for you. But I mentioned that there's lots of changes in this space, and the changes are happening very frequently. You can find me at my website there if you wanted to, and you can book an appointment to talk to me about your specific circumstances. But once a month on a Friday, and the next one's coming up on the 25th of September, because those who know me well know I love a glass of red wine. I have what I call a Rewind with Rosa, which is a Zoom session where you can log on and I talk about the big decisions and big changes that have happened in the preceding month in employment law, and you can fire me any questions that you want. So if anyone's interested, again, you can find details on my website. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rosa. That was great. For a layperson that I am with any kind of law, I guess, it was the things that I really took away from that. Well, firstly, was your pyramid. I think that's a great way to represent how everything works and just the complexity of it, and understanding probably then the importance of things like employment contracts or contract agreements, which I would probably assume for most of our members who are small businesses would be most apt, I think. And I think a great piece of information there was having that clause, which is probably easily overlooked, to have in a contract agreement where the employee agrees with any current and future policies as well. Obviously a very important one there. Policies obviously a must-have too. I think in terms of managing that liability, very important for any business, and there's some great resources out there to get some standardized policies. So I'd encourage people to definitely pay attention to that advice from Rosa, and the casual conversion provisions. That's really, really interesting. I think, like you said, there's been a lot of change happening in the regarding casual employment, and I think it's becoming less and less attractive to have a casual staff member on, in that kind of mid to long term now. So I think there'll be some pretty significant changes in that space moving forward. We did have one question for you, Rosa, just from Ross. Just quickly, he's asked what employment trends or challenges have been emerging during COVID, if there is any that you've noticed.
Yeah, look, I think one of the big things I really want to actually warn everyone about, it sounds terrible, like I'm honest, but it's about redundancies. When we're coming, well, you're ahead of us, but coming out of COVID, you really need, and you're coming out of COVID, but you're not quite ready at the point to have all your staff back from JobKeeper, because your business isn't where it was perhaps before you went into JobKeeper, and you want to make some people redundant. You can, but please do it very carefully. You can't just arbitrarily select someone to be made redundant. Most awards have what they call major change consultation requirements. So if you're looking to make a certain number of your employees redundant, there's a number of steps. It's not complicated, but there's a number of consultation steps you have to go through to avoid getting an unfair dismissal claim. I've run a number of unfair dismissal claims during this period, both for employers and employees. So just be careful. I can look here now. Just be careful if you're going to make people redundant. And that's what's going to be the big challenge coming out of COVID. Obviously, there's been a whole lot more litigation. I saw a quote from Ross Smith, who's the president of the Fair Work Commission. I think it was up by 400%. I can't remember. It was something phenomenal, the increase in claims, because people are becoming much more litigious. They're losing their jobs. They don't know what to do. And they're more keen to try and get some compensation out of their employers.
Yeah.
My best advice is, when in doubt, get legal advice, get it early, get it offered.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key messaging there, is in such a complicated environment and a changing environment, I think any advice that our members and businesses can seek will fare them well in maybe making those decisions, but also implementing them as well.
One thing can I say that I just want to be careful about is I did say you can have that clause in your contract about changing policies, but you've got to be careful what's written into your enterprise agreement or written into your award, because some of those documents contain information about how you implement policies. But that was more tailored to a small business who...
Yeah, great. Awesome. Thank you, Rosa. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
No worries, my pleasure.
Appreciate it very much. We're going to wrap it up here, guys. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I think we had about 40 at the peak, I think about 46 members with us this morning. So thank you very much for your time. A quick reminder that if you do have any challenges or issues, to continue to get in touch with the team and myself. We are here for you. We want to do whatever we can to advocate for any kind of change that you need, but also connect you with the support that you might need as well. I think an important thing that we've learnt this morning is the value in retaining business rather than letting the businesses kind of fall by the wayside and then have to kickstart the economy again. What we focus on is keeping you guys functioning and surviving through this. So please get in touch with us if you do need any support. A reminder that board nominations, so directorship nominations, close on the 24th of September. So they're open at the moment. If you are interested, please get in touch with myself or any of the other board members for Albury Northside Chamber. Reminder that we do have some spaces for rent here at Albury Northside too. In terms of events, we've got a couple of events coming up. On the 10th, 2 days from now, we've got Business Bites, a pretty critical topic, budgeting and cash flow management. On the 23rd of September, we've got a great event, mental wellbeing, looking after ourselves and others, with Richard Brown from Step Psychology. And on the 28th of September, we've got project management in action, and they're going to be talking about Microsoft Project, adapting it to your business. On the 13th of October, like I mentioned at the beginning, we've got the annual general meeting, and there's something exciting that we will be announcing for that as well. So please, if you can, earmark that date, the 13th of October, for our AGM. AGMs can be boring, ours won't be. And that is what I will leave you with this morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope you have a great day and rest of the week, and we will speak again soon.